Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome back in our second last lecture, that is lecture number 31, and it's about the revision of our lectures from 17 to 22. And in this lecture we will be revising the concept of ijara, then applications of Islamic finance, and then we will discuss Islamic investment funds, and after that we will discuss sukuk. So we are going to repeat or revise about 4 of the topics, and in lecture number 17 we discussed ijara. So ijara, as you know, that it's a lease contract. Ijara we call in its Arabic term, but if we look in its English term, it is a lease contract. And ijara or lease is a form of contract which is permissible in Islamic financial system, and generally it's a contract of exchange of counter values between usufruct and lease payment. So what is leased out, it is an asset, but that asset must have its beneficial use. So for that beneficial use, a price is charged, and that price is known as the rental amount, or its price is the lease price is the rents, and it's a substitute of ownership. If you don't want to own any asset, you can rent that asset. And like other contracts, an ijara contract has to fulfill all the conditions of a valid contract stipulated by Sharia. That means that any activities that are being conducted through this contract, it should be Sharia compliant. And ijara literally means to rent or lease something. In its technical sense, the term ijara has 2 different connotations. That is, a hire contract to employ the services. So employ the services means whatever services as managers, as technician, as engineers, doctors we provide, it's a kind of ijara contract. That is, as a reward of these services, we charge a rent, we charge a fee for that. And this is also called an ijara contract. And on the other hand, a lease contract to transfer the usufruct of assets, that is the beneficial use of the assets. And there are different applications of ijara. For example, in property financing, the mode we are going to discuss, it's not about the services of individuals like the engineers, carpenters, tailors, but in this subject in this topic we are going to discuss the lease contract of assets, that is ijara of usufruct of assets. And it has its application in the property financing, vehicle financing, project financing, personal financing, and structured products. Products can be designed according to the requirements using ijara mode. And there are different types of ijara, that is ijara muntahiya bit tamlik, that is we also call it ijara wa iqtina, that is a lease contract which ends up into a sale of the asset either to the lessee or to any third party. And then the second one is ijara summa al-bay, that is ijara, offering the asset for lease, and after the lease time expires, then it will be sold either to the lessee or to any third party. And ijara is a contract that comprises several principal features, namely the usufruct and services. So the main idea of the ijara contract is that the asset is going to be leased, and that asset should have some beneficial use. And this is one of the important things. Then what are the assets that qualify for ijara contract, and what are the ownership rights and liabilities, utilization of leased asset, how it should be used in different business activities, and what will be the lease period in case of ijara, and the rental amount and payment. What will be the rental amount and how it can be paid. So these are the main features of ijara contract. So first of all, usufruct and services. Ijara applies to both hire of services and lease of property for wages or fee and rental respectively. And ijara may be in the form of hiring of services or labor, such as hiring the services of an engineer, a carpenter, a tailor to undertake a specific task in exchange of consideration in the form of a fee or a wage for the service rendered. And ijara may be executed on the utilization of a usufruct of tangible assets, as we will be discussing in this lecture, that assets, they have their beneficial use. For example, a warehouse can be used beneficially by the people who want to store something into that warehouse, and the vehicles, they have their beneficial use, and machineries, they have their beneficial use. So different type of assets, they have their different type of beneficial uses. And if the asset doesn't have a beneficial use, or if the asset doesn't have a usufruct, that type of asset cannot be leased. And Islamic financial institutions have adopted two modes of ijara, which are the operating lease and the structured operating lease. Operating lease actually means that the lease time period is shorter than the useful life of the asset, and structured operating lease means that when the lease time finishes and still the asset is useful, it has a benefit, it has a usufruct, so then that asset is sold to the lessee. So that is known as ijara muntahiya bit-tamlik as well. And the subject matter of ijara may be an existing usufruct as well as the usufruct to be established in future, where the asset is delivered in future. If the asset is already there, and it has a usufruct, it can be the subject matter of ijara. But if the contract is for an asset which is going to be constructed, that is also kind of ijara contract for an asset which will be produced in future. For example, if a tenant is there and the tenant wants a warehouse, and the bank construct a warehouse for the tenant, and that asset is to be manufactured or to be produced later on, even after the contract. So then when that asset has been manufactured and it can be used beneficially by the tenant or the client, only then the lease payments will start. And the rental amount received by financier shall be earned only upon effective delivery of the usufruct. That is, when the warehouse is completed and the usufruct is established. Now it can be used beneficially, only then the lease would start. And the rental amount would start only when the usufruct is established. And the rental amount received in advance by financier shall be refunded to the lessee if the asset cannot be effectively delivered to the lessee. And if at the time of contract some amount was received in advance and the asset could not be delivered to the lessee, or there was found some defects in the asset, and that time those advances should be returned back to the client. And in relation to the above point, upon completion of the leased asset under a forward lease and prior to enjoyment of the usufruct, the lessee may purchase the leased asset and the forward rental may be adjusted into the selling price of that asset. For example, if the contract was to lease the house which is being constructed, so then when that house is constructed, the lessee may purchase the same house, and anything which was paid in advance, that can be adjusted in the price of that house. And the leased asset may be tangible or intangible, such as the trademark, patent, and other form of intellectual property. And the tangible assets shall be durable. They will not be perishable, or they are non-perishable. And the tangible assets may be movable or immovable. The tangible assets may be a vehicle that can be moved from here to there, and it may be a plant or equipment which can be installed at a particular place. So this illustration says that a fast food operator seeks financing from an Islamic financial institution for the food business comprising stock of food, the store, and the brand name of the principal operator. A lease contract drawn between the Islamic financial institution and the customer applies only to the store and brand name, because the stock of food is perishable and it doesn't qualify to be an asset in the lease contract. And the lease asset shall be specified and be clearly identified by the contracting parties. For example, if this is a contract for a shop and all the details have been finalized between the parties, but the exact location of that shop is not mentioned. For example, a shop, as I mentioned this example in our previous lecture as well, that if a shop is situated in blue area and in one of the plazas there, that plaza name is mentioned, but on which floor the shop is situated, it is not mentioned. So in that case, it's not a valid ijara contract. And where the asset is held by a partnership, each partner shall jointly own the asset and have the right to benefit from the rental income. So whatever rental income is derived from the asset, that will be distributed among the owners of that asset. And a client may jointly with an Islamic financial institution acquire an asset from a third party. The client subsequently leases the asset from the Islamic financial institution. In such an arrangement, the rental payment to the Islamic financial institution shall be proportionate to the ownership of the Islamic financial institution. And this is exactly the example of diminishing musharaka contract, where the share of the Islamic financial institution keeps on decreasing, and proportionately rental income is distributed or given to the Islamic financial institution. The lessor shall be liable for all expenses incurred in acquiring the leased asset, and the acquisition cost may also be considered while determining the rental rate. Because the lessor is the owner, so all costs of ownership are responsibility of the lessor. And the shares in a company shall not qualify a lease asset of ijara. So the stocks, they don't qualify to be an asset in a lease contract. The leased asset shall be the lessor's property, but it may be registered under the name of the lessee, provided that all the liabilities and risks arising out of the ownership of the asset, they are assumed or they are borne by the lessor. The financier may purchase an asset from the customer with the purpose to lease it back to the customer, which is very much common practice, and we have seen that before in the case of Skook, where the SPV issues Skooks to the Skook holders and receives funds, and then the SPV purchases the asset from the originator, and the same asset is leased back to the originator. And after some time period, when the lease contract expires, those assets are again purchased by the originator from the SPV. So these arrangements are being practiced and it is allowed, but there are huge number of scholars which have objected such type of arrangements. And the customer's share in an asset jointly owned with the Islamic financial institution may be pledged to the Islamic financial institution as a security. Particularly if you see the diminishing musharaka contract, the share of the client into that property can be pledged in this contract against any default risk from the client. And the rights and liabilities arising from the ownership of the leased asset shall be with the lessor, while the rights and liabilities arising from the use of the leased asset shall be with the lessee. So the owner's liability is that the asset should have its usufruct, and for that usufruct owner is charging a price which is the rent. So if anything happens to the asset, any damage happens to the asset out of natural causes, then the owner or the lessor is responsible for that. But if the misconduct of the lessee results in some losses, that will be recovered from the lessee. The leased asset in the lessee's actual or constructive possession shall be a form of a trust. So this is a trust. This is an amana from the lessor to the lessee. And there shall not be compensation by the lessee to the lessor in case of impairment of the asset value, except when such impairment is caused due to the negligence or misconduct or breach of terms and conditions by the lessee. And any loss or impairment relating to a leased asset shall be borne by the lessor throughout the lease period due to the factors not caused by negligence or misconduct. Lessor is the owner, and any damage, any loss arising out during the natural use of that, during the normal use of that asset, is the responsibility of the owner or the lessor. And if the asset is damaged or the usufruct is damaged because of the negligence of the lessee, so in that case, if the lessee is no more able to use that asset, so then the rental amount will be paid to the lessor during that time period. The usufruct is restored, and that usufruct will be restored by the lessee. This loss will be recovered from the lessee because this is out of negligence or misconduct. And if the usufruct of the leased asset is impaired wholly or partially as a result of natural causes without any misconduct or without any negligence of the lessee, and the usufruct is damaged and that asset is no more usable by the lessee, so in that case usufruct will be restored or repaired, and during that time period rental amount will not be paid to the lessor. And maintenance expenses of leased asset shall be borne by the lessor, because lessor is the owner and lessor is selling the beneficial use only, and to keep the usufruct maintained is the responsibility of the lessor. And any operational maintenance and expenses relating to the usage of the leased asset shall be borne by the lessee, who acts on a fiduciary trust relationship to safeguard the interest of the lessor. The example is that if you have hired a house, now you are living in that house, so you have to take care of all the things. You are not supposed to break the things or to damage the usufruct, but due to the natural use or due to the normal use of that house, if any wear and tear happens, that is the responsibility of the owner of the house or the lessor. But as a lessee, you are supposed to be careful while using that house, because this is a trust, this is an amana for you. And when major maintenance of the leased asset is delegated to the lessee, all costs incurred for such maintenance shall be reimbursed by the lessor. And if the lessee is delegated with this responsibility to maintain the usufruct, so for that purpose all the costs shall be paid by the lessor. And the lessor may agree with the lessee that the lessee bears the takaful cost, provided that cost is reimbursed from the lessor. The leased asset may be subleased with the consent of the lessor, but if it is mentioned in the contract that asset cannot be leased out, in that case the asset should not be leased. The asset should not be subleased, and the sublease, the period of sublease should be smaller than the lease contract. That is the principal contract, which is the lease contract, and after that if the asset is subleased, in that case the duration of sublease should be shorter than the lease contract. And the rental payment for the sublease may be equal to the initial contract, or it may be more than that, or it may be less than that. And then at the end of the lease contract, the asset may be sold to the client, or it may be gifted to the client. And the mode of transfer of the leased asset in ijara muntahiya bitamlik may be in the way of a gift or a sale of that leased asset. And the ownership shall be transferred to the lessee by executing a sale contract of the asset as promised at any time during the lease time period. And that sale may take place even during the lease period. The lessee and the lessor, with their mutual agreement, the asset can be sold to the lessee even during the lease time period. And the transfer of leased asset may be effected in the form of a gift, as it is mentioned earlier, that it may be gifted to the client or to the lessee. And the transfer of usufruct of leased asset from the lessor to lessee is valid from the Sharia perspective. However, it will be based on the permissibility of the core activity of the lessee, whether it is Sharia compliant or not. When the asset is leased for a certain time, for a certain objective, that objective should be halal. For example, if it is leased out to transport the alcoholic drinks or narcotics or something like that, which is not allowed in Sharia, so in that case it's not a valid contract, it is not allowed. And the lessee shall observe the terms and conditions of the utilization of the leased asset until the expiry of the lease time period, or until the termination of that contract, and the lessee shall use the leased asset only for the purpose specified in the lease agreement. And if the agreement doesn't specify the purpose of the lease agreement, then it should be understood that the lessee will use the asset according to its customary use, that is, what is its main business. For example, if the lessee is operating in some market, so the main, suppose in a commodity market or suppose in a vegetable market, so the commodities which are going to be transported with the vehicle, so they are the vegetables. So the lessee should use it according to the perception, if it is not mentioned into the contract. And the lessee shall obtain permission from the lessor if the leased asset is to be used for permissible purpose other than its common utilization, But if the lessee want to use it for some other purpose, then the lessee should seek the consent of the lessor. And the asset shall not be leased to a person or entity if it is known that that person can utilize the asset for non-Sharia compliant activities. And the lessee shall be liable for any variation from the permissible use of the leased asset for the purpose which is against the Sharia. And the terms and conditions on the use of the leased asset specified by the lessor may allow the lessee flexibility to increase, enhance, extend or expand the use of the leased asset, including lease payment consideration. So if the asset was leased and it was mentioned, suppose it's a vehicle for the transportation of the workers of a factory. So if the asset is used, it is mentioned in the contract that for one shift it will be used, and if the lessee want to use it for 2 shifts, in that case the permission of the lessor is necessary, and accordingly the rental amount will also be refixed. And the period of lease shall be agreed and specified as per the terms of the contract, and the lease period shall effectively commence from the time the lessee has access to the usufruct of the asset, regardless of the actual utilization of the asset. When the asset is delivered to the lessee and lessee can benefit from its use, then the rental would start, and lease time period would start from that time. And the lease period shall terminate at maturity of the period, and if the asset is impaired in terms of its function or utility, or when both parties mutually agree to cancel the contract. And the rental amount may be paid in cash, kind, or in the form of services. So this example says that the rental amount can be paid in the form of services as well. And the rental or lease amount shall be determined upon acceptance of the offer of the lease contract, and the amount of rental specified and mutually agreed for the lease period shall not vary during that lease period. And if it needs to be renewed, then effectively a new lease contract is there. And if after that particular time period a rental amount is not refixed, it means it will continue the same. And now we will discuss the applications of Islamic finance. So we have its different applications, like in the project finance, in the working capital finance, import and export finance. And the basic principles of Musharaka and Mudarba applies in case of project financing. And the financing in participatory modes of financing doesn't mean advancing of loans. So under Islamic economic system or the financial system, the loans are not forwarded. Every advancement of the monetary resources is based on certain mechanism, which is, in this case, it will be Musharaka or Mudarba. And the capital contribution or investments must qualify the requirement of Musharaka or Mudarba, that the capital which is invested into such kind of transactions, I mean project financing, it should qualify the requirements of capital which has been mentioned in the contracts of Musharaka and Mudarba. And it can be used for import financing and for export financing. And in case of import financing, if the letter of credit has been opened without any margin, the form of Mudarba can be adopted. It means if it is opened with a margin, it means the contribution is made both by the client and the financial institution. And if the letter of credit is opened with some margin, the form of Musharaka or a combination of both will be relevant here. And after the imported goods are cleared from the port, their sale proceeds may be shared according to the pre-agreed ratio. So at the time of agreement, profit sharing ratio is determined, and in case of loss, it will be shared according to the investment proportion. And ownership of the imported goods shall remain with the financier to the extent of the ratio of investment. So if the investment is 50% each, so in that case, whatever goods are imported, 50% of the ownership would remain with the Islamic financial institution. And sale proceeds at market rate shall be divided according to the ownership proportions. And in case of export financing, goods are sold at predetermined price. Goods price has already been determined, and the financier can easily calculate the expected profit because the client has already got an order to export the goods. So the client and the buyer, client being the supplier and the importer being the purchaser, the buyer, they have already decided a price, Now, it is an opportunity for the bank to negotiate a rate or a price in the market to get a maximum amount of profits. Musharaka and Mudarba both are possible here, and any loss resulting from the negligence by the exporter will be recovered from the exporter. And any loss out of natural reasons will be shared according to the capital contribution. And Musharaka instrument can be used in the following ways to finance a working capital. So in case of working capital, there are three methods, that is capital evaluation with mutual consent, then sharing in the gross profits only, and running Musharaka account on the basis of daily products. So we will not go into greater detail. In case of capital evaluation with mutual consent, it means whatever is the value of the business of the client, that will be the share of the client, and whatever is contributed by the Islamic financial institution, that will be the share or the contribution into that partnership, and the proportion of the partnership will be determined like that. So in this case, all the capital assets, they are valued, and then the price is kind of tricky job. Then both the parties, they have to agree on that job, on the valuation of those assets, to determine the share of the client, and then the share of the bank will be the contribution of the bank. So in this case, the valuation of the asset is not easier because the depreciation methods, they are different. Sometimes depreciation is a straight line depreciation, like whatever is the value of the asset, it is divided onto the useful life of the asset. Suppose worth of the asset is 10,000 and the useful life is 2 years. It means each year 5,000 is the depreciation expense. But there can be some different methods as well. Suppose in the first year the depreciation may be charged 8,000, the second year may be 2,000, and likewise. So there are different techniques. What we know, that modified accelerated cost recovery system, in the beginning years the depreciation expenses, they are high, but in the later years the depreciation charges, they are lower. The idea is that when the asset is new, it can be utilized more, and when the asset is getting old, its usefulness or its efficiency decreases. So the depreciation techniques, they are different. So there may be some disagreement on the depreciation of the assets. So the valuation of the assets would be a tricky job here. And then the second one is sharing in the gross profits only, because it's not easier to evaluate the whole capital of the client. Then this is an arrangement where the gross profit is shared between the partners. So in this case, the client has different businesses. Client has complete setup, warehouses, the workforce, the managerial staff, then the machineries, everything, and those things, they are the share of the client. But we cannot value all that share. So in this case, whatever project is financed, whatever working capital is financed by the bank, so that raw materials, they are processed into the at the place or at the facility of the client, and the direct expenses, they are charged here to determine the gross profit. So those direct expenses may be the transportation, the processing, or anything that can be attributed directly to those raw materials which are going to be converted into finished goods. So here the direct expenses will be deducted to determine the gross profit, and then that gross profit can be shared into different ways. One is that the share of profit of the client can be set higher than that of the Islamic financial institution because of all the facilities of the client. And then the other mode is that the rent of different facilities is determined, and before the distribution of the profit, rent for that all the facilities is determined. For example, the warehouse, the service charges of the staff of that plant, the rent of that plant and machinery, of that transportation. So these facilities, they are paid rent, and after that, if something is left, that is distributed between the Islamic financial institution and the client. And the third mechanism is running Musharaka account on daily basis. So in this mechanism, the working capital is financed by the Islamic bank by opening an account from where the client can deduct or can withdraw the amounts at any time and can deposit the revenues into that account. So the financial institution finance the working capital of an enterprise by opening a running account for them, and the clients draw different amounts at different intervals, and client keep depositing their surplus amounts into that account. So that account is operational. There will be reductions, there will be additions, and the process of debit and credit goes on up to the date of maturity, and the interest is calculated on daily basis in case of conventional banking system. So in conventional system, on daily basis, on the outstanding balance, interest amount is calculated, and client can withdraw cash as per their need within the limit of running musharaka. Their maximum limit is set there. They cannot go beyond that limit, and they can withdraw at any time, and clients can deposit their collection in the running musharaka account during at any time, and clients are only required to pay profit to the bank for the net capital extended under running musharaka facility to the client, and the average balance of the contributions made to the musharaka account calculated on the daily basis. The outstanding balance shall be treated as the share capital of the financier, and any time the outstanding balance from that account will be the share or the contribution of the bank. The profit accruing at the end of the term shall be calculated on daily basis and shall be distributed accordingly. And musharaka in the form of import financing. Musharaka can be used for import financing as well, as it has been discussed a little bit in the project financing as well. The types of bank charges on the letter of credit under the conventional banking system are the service charges for opening an LC and interest charge on LC which are not opened on full margin. So these are the conventional arrangements, whereas and on the same lines, collecting service charges for opening an LC is allowed. Instead of charging interest on the letter of credit on the balances, the service charges collection is allowed, and interest cannot be charged in any case. Two methods of financing LCs are proposed. One is based on musharaka or mudarba, the other one is based on murabha. So as it is clear that in case of musharaka, whatever amount is contributed or paid by the Islamic financial institution as the partial payment of those goods, that will be the contribution by the Islamic financial institution, and if the whole capital is provided by the Islamic financial institution, then there will be a mudarba arrangement, and if the Islamic financial institution makes the payment and purchases the asset and then sells it to the client, then there will be a murabha arrangement. And in case of export financing, there are two possibilities, that is pre-shipment and post-shipment. In case of pre-shipment, it is very simple, that client has already entered into a sale contract with the importer. Now the price is already determined there. Now the client will ask the bank to help manufacture or to procure the goods which needs to be shipped or which needs to be exported. So in that case, again, musharaka and mudarba contracts can be applicable here, and in case of default by the exporter, the ultimate loser is the Islamic financial institution, and to avoid such losses, exporter can be held liable for any misconduct, and the resulting losses will be recovered from the exporter. So exporter might be negligent here, or there may be some misconduct by the exporter, or maybe because of the delays that order is cancelled. Now the bank's share is at risk. Now that risk can be compensated by getting some securities or by making the exporter responsible for any such type of losses. And in case of post-shipment, goods have already been delivered. Now the client has only a bill where it is mentioned that such and such amount will be received from that importer. So the client has a claim of debt. Post-shipment finance is similar to the discounting of the bill. Now that claim cannot be discounted under Islamic financial system. However, the exporter with the bill of exchange can appoint the bank as his agent to collect receivables on its behalf. Now the exporter who has already exported the goods, instead of discounting the bill, can assign the duty to the Islamic bank to make collections on behalf of the exporter, and the Islamic bank will charge the collection fee And then Islamic bank can purchase that certificate at its face value. That, or maybe we can say that Islamic bank can provide a Qard Hasana equal to the amount which is receivable from the importer. So that Qard Hasana is transferred to the client, whereas collection charges will be received from the client, and then it will be mentioned into the contract that whatever collections have been made by the bank, they will be compensated against that Qard Hasana. And because this will be the same amount, so the loan is paid. Now Islamic investment funds. Islamic investment funds, that is, it is mentioned or discussed earlier, it is a pool of fund which has been created by different subscribers or different contributors. We, the people, we have our savings, and we need some platform where we can invest our funds in a halal means. So the Islamic investment funds, just like Islamic banking accounts, they provide a forum that people, they can subscribe into these pool of funds, and these pool of funds will be used in a Sharia compliant manner to generate profits. So those profits will be distributed to the subscribers of those funds. And the subscriber of funds receive a document, may be called a certificate, a unit, a share, or any other name representing the value, and will earn prorated profits on it. So the subscribers of that fund will get in return the profits that fund is going to earn into the market, and the subscribers being partners, and they will share the profit according to their capital contribution proportions. And management can share in the profits or can charge a fee for their services on monthly or annual basis. And returns are tied up with the actual profits earned or losses suffered. In case of loss caused by negligence on part of the management, compensation will be provided by the management. And funds raised must be invested in Sharia approved businesses. These funds cannot be invested into any activity which is not allowed under Sharia. For example, investing into interest-bearing securities is not allowed. Investing into alcoholic businesses is not allowed, or any business which is not Sharia compliant, investment of these funds into those businesses is not allowed. And there are different fund managers. I recommended you earlier as well, when you look into on the Google, you search for that, the fund managers in Pakistan, you will see almost all the Islamic banks and conventional banks, they are managing different kinds of funds. For example, UBL Sharia Stock Fund, United Islamic Income Fund, HBL Islamic Money Market Fund, HBL Islamic Stock Fund, Al Mizan Mutual Fund Limited, Askari Islamic Asset Collection Fund. I only picked the Islamic funds. There are so many funds which are being managed under the conventional system as well by the conventional banks. And there are different modes of investment of these pool of funds. For example, the equity funds. If the funds are raised to invest into the equities or into the stocks of different firms, that is known as the equity fund. There are different conditions for the equity funds, that the companies where the investments are going to be made, the shares are going to be purchased. Those companies should involve only in halal businesses. Their main business should be halal business. But in Pakistan or all over the world, this is the practice of the firms, that they deposit their surplus money into some interest-bearing accounts, or they invest it into some interest-bearing securities, and they have income from those interest incomes. And if the interest income proportion is more than 5%, the fund managers should avoid investing into such stocks. But if the interest income or the haram income proportion into the total income is less than 5%, then those stocks can be purchased. And the Ijara funds is that that pool of fund, some asset will be purchased and it will be leased to some parties, to the lessee. And the rental amounts, they are received by the fund managers, and they will charge their fee, and the remaining will be distributed proportionately among the subscribers of the fund. In the commodity funds, when the funds they are used to purchase commodities and then to resell them in the market to earn profits, that is the commodity funds. And then there are Murabha funds, then the funds are used to purchase some asset and then to sell it for some late payments, that is ownership is transferred right away, but the payments are received later on. That will be the Murabha fund. Then there is concept of Bay'ad Dain, that is sale of debt. So sale of debt is not allowed in Islamic financial system. So here it means that in case of equity funds and in case of Ijara funds, commodity funds and Murabha funds, the ownership represents something. The ownership of the subscribers or the fund holders, it is either in the assets or it is either in the claims. For example, if in the case of Ijara, the funds are invested into some tangible assets. So those assets, they are in the ownership of the fund, and each subscriber of that fund is a partial owner into that asset. So the certificate those subscribers they are having, they are actually they are representing an ownership into a tangible asset. And at the same time, if it is a Murabha fund, the asset was purchased and it was it was sold to the client, and the client promised to make the payment later on. Now the certificates which the subscribers they are having, they are actually a claim against a debt, a partial claim against a debt. So they are owners into a debt. They don't have any tangible asset underlying this fund. So here these certificates cannot be traded. These certificates cannot be sold. But the Ijara funds, the certificates in Ijara funds can be negotiated in the market. So this is the concept here, that if the documents they are representing a debt, it cannot be sold. But if it is representing a tangible asset, it can be sold. And in case of mixed fund, when different funds are being managed, then the income is derived maybe from the equity funds, maybe from the Ijara investments, maybe from Murabha investment. So there is a mixture of different investment activities, and funds are derived from all these activities. Now the ownership of the fund will be tangible assets and will be non-tangible assets. And if the tangible assets are more than 50%, again the subscriber of this fund, they can sell their certificates in the secondary market or to any other party. But in case of Murabha fund, certificates can only be traded at their face value. And in case of mixed fund, where the tangible and non-tangible assets are there, and the tangible assets are equal to or more than 50%, then these certificates can be sold into the market, but their price should be more than 50% of their face value. And now we will discuss Sukuk, one of the most important topics in the Islamic financial system and also one of the controversial topics in the Islamic financial system. It is a substitute of bond, because bonds are issued by the conventional banks or the governments or the entities which qualify to issue these certificates. These are the debt securities, and it carries interest on it. An interest rate has been mentioned on these certificates, and those interest rates, they are the income of the bondholders or the subscribers into these securities. The Sukuk is a replica of that bond. So in a bond is a debt security, whereas Sukuk is a security, whereas in this case underlying asset is there. It is Sukuks, they are sold for some particular activity, and an asset is purchased for different kind of activities. So you can see here the conventional financial market, they issue Sukuks, and this is a debt-based instrument, whereas Islamic financial market, they deal in Sukuks, which are asset-based instruments. They are actually issued for the construction or for the purchase of particular tangible assets. So the Sukuks refer to securitization, a process in which ownership of the underlying asset is transferred to a large number of the investors. So in Sukuk, all the subscribers, they are the owner into that underlying asset. These are certificates of equal redeemable values representing undivided share in ownership of the tangible assets of particular project or specific investment activity and service. So these Skook certificates, they are just like bonds, they have equal denomination, maybe 1000 rupees each certificate, and they have an undivided share in the underlying asset. And its great potential is in transforming an asset's future cash flows into present cash flows. And Skook may be issued on existing as well as specific assets that may become available at a future date. And Skooks can be issued for an existing asset, or it can be issued for an asset which is going to be manufactured. And assets, the objective of Skook is to enable organizations to raise capital in a Sharia compliant fashion instead of issuing bonds which is not a Sharia compliant certificate. This facilitates the organizations, the firms, to arrange finances in a Sharia compliant fashion, and expanding the investor base. So the investments can be from different investors, and normally the bigger corporations, the businesses, the banks, and the Islamic financial institutions, they are the subscriber of the Skooks. But the individual, they also qualify, whoever has his saving, and they can invest into the Skooks, and offering investment opportunities to the new groups. So in a Sharia compliant fashion, the people, they can make their investments into different ventures. It may be for the road construction, it may be for a bridge construction, it may be for a building construction, for the infrastructure construction, or for any purpose. And the basics of Skook are that while a conventional bond is a promise to repay a loan, Skook constitutes partial ownership in a debt. If it is a Skook al-Murabha, and it represents partial ownership in asset, if it is Skook al-Ijara, and if it is a project, Skook al-Istisna, and it represents a partial ownership in a business, if it is a Skook al-Musharka, and in an investment, if it is Skook al-Istismar. And Skook structures replicate the cash flows of conventional bonds and are listed on exchange and tradable in the secondary market. Its dealing is quite same as that of bond, but the core activities which are being conducted by Skook, they are completely different than the bonds. Bonds are debt instruments, whereas Skooks, they represent ownership into particular assets, businesses, ventures, or projects, or claims, or debts. And Skook is popularly known as Sharia compliant bond. In actual fact, it is an asset-backed trust certificate. In its simplest form, Skook is a certificate evidencing ownership in asset, as mentioned in the previous slide. The Skook structure relies on the creation of special purpose vehicle. That is, whoever requires the funds, they will create a special purpose vehicle to interact with the investors. And the SPV would issue Skook certificates, which represents the ownership of an asset, entitlement, or rental income. And the returns provided to Skook holders, therefore, come in the form of profit from a sale, rental, or combination of the both. Skook could be based on Mudarba, Murabha, Musharka, and almost all modes of financing. Skook securities are normally purchased and held by the investors. As a result, little of the securities enter in the secondary market. Not like bonds, where the bonds are available to make investments. Skook certificates, they are held by the investors, and not many Skook securities are available in the secondary market. Furthermore, only public Skook are able to enter this market as they are listed on stock exchanges. Public Skooks, they are listed on stock exchanges, and they are traded in the secondary market or stock exchange. Shirka based and Ijara Skook. Marketing based on the market signals and the forces. And in case of Murabha, Salam, and Istisna Skook, they represent a claim only, so can be negotiated only at its face value. When the underlying asset is there, then that asset, that claim, or that Skook certificate can be traded into the market, maybe more than the face value or less than the face value. Whereas, if the underlying business was a sale business, for example, with the Skook proceeds, an asset was purchased and it was sold, like in the case of Murabha, and if the asset is purchased for the deferred delivery in the case of Salam and Istisna, then these Skook certificates, they represent a claim, they represent an ownership into a debt. Now, these skooks cannot be sold into the secondary market except at their face value. So, the claims can only be traded at their face value. Anything, any addition or any reduction from the face value, that will constitute riba or interest, which is not allowed. And instruments representing a pool of different categories are subject to the rules relating to the dominant category in the pool. If there are tangible assets and there are non-tangible assets which have been financed by these skook funds, so then if the tangible assets they are more than 50%, the skooks they offer many advantages to the issuer, that is diversify funding sources. Funding sources are diversified and create an enhanced profile in the international market. When some entity is going to issue skooks, they will get recognition all over the world. They will have some rating from the rating agencies. And there is pricing benchmark, secondary liquidity, sizable financing, ease of clearing and settlement. So just like the securities in the conventional financial market, they have ease of settlement, ease of clearance. So the skooks, they almost have the same kind of features, and it is kind of Sharia compliant facility and a replica of bonds. And to the investors, these provide platforms for the investors to invest in a Sharia compliant way, and provides leveraging capabilities to the investors. And the investors, they can sell in the secondary market, ease of clearing and settlement is there. Investment available to institutional and retail investors are also there, and allows for many computation of risk, credit, that is credit, market and duration, etc. And some popular skooks, as has been mentioned before, Murabha skook, Ijara, Istisna, Salam, Musharka, Mudarba, these skooks are in place in the market. And then let's discuss the differences between a skook and the bond. In skook, because there is an underlying asset, and that asset is either leased out or it is sold, and profits are derived either from the sale or from the rental income. And income is generated from the assets, whereas in bonds, income is derived from the debt instrument. In skook, return is expected from the investment, whereas return is interest and it is predetermined. Whatever is the underlying business activity, it is not the objective of bond. As far as the investors are concerned, they are only concerned with the income or the return out of this investment. And skook's negotiability is restricted to specific type of skook, like we discussed, the tangible assets and non-tangible assets. If it is a claim, it cannot be traded. And bonds can be negotiated at any time because they are negotiable in the secondary market. And skook issue is a seller of assets. Skook issue is a seller of assets, whereas bond issuer is a borrower. Skook issuer is a seller of asset. For example, we discussed the WABDA skooks, where WABDA established an SPV and WABDA issued some skooks and sold its own asset, although it was leased back by WABDA, but they sell their own asset. And whereas bond issuer is a borrower. Skook holder is an owner of the asset, bond holder is a lender. Seller-buyer relationship is there in case of skook, lender-borrower relationship is there in case of bond. Business risk-return relationship, because this is an investment in skook, so there is a relationship of risk and return against an investment. It's an entrepreneurial activity where the risk is faced, so the return is the reward, and profits are the reward. And in case of bond, issuer guarantees the payment of face value and periodic interest. In case of skook, major risk lays with underlying asset. So if there is some capital impairment or capital loss in the underlying asset, that will be charged to all the skook holders. Whereas in case of conventional bond, major risk is with issuer, that is known as credit risk. And return is expected from the underlying asset, interest payment is the obligation. Return of investors' capital cannot be guaranteed, and issuer is obligated to return investors' capital at its face value in case of bond. So these are the differences. But the practice of skook makes it controversial because many differences we have discussed in these differences. there are no more differences practically. For example, bonds, they are redeemed at their face value, skooks are being redeemed at their face value, bonds, they carry an interest rate onto it, skooks, they carry a rate, and normally that rate is paid throughout the skook period, and these things, they make it suspicious. Now let's discuss some controversies in skook. Some Sharia boards approve the structure or allow their respective institutions to invest in such business deals. Others have prevented institutions under their respective supervision to invest in such skook, viewing them Sharia non-compliant. So if we talk of skook al-musharaka, some Sharia boards, they think this is allowed, this is halal, whereas some Sharia boards of banks or financial institutions, they think that it should not be allowed. So this is a controversy between the scholars as well. And disagreement, what is the point of disagreement? That is, the disagreement arises on the permissibility for one of the musharaka partners to give an undertaking to purchase the share or unit of the second partner of the musharaka at the maturity of the skook at face value and a predetermined price. That is, the guarantee which is provided by one of the partners in a musharaka skook that skooks will be redeemed at their face value. So this guarantee to redeem the skooks at the face value is not credible. It is not allowed under the Sharia. So this makes it doubtful. And then guarantee and skook issuance, a third party who is normally the originator of the skook provides a guarantee for the principal capital of the skook. Now the guarantee is provided by the originator. So originator is a third party. Although they assume them a third party, but they are not a third party. The originator benefiting from the skook proceeds establishes a special purpose vehicle that issues the skook, while the originator stands by to provide a guarantee against the shortfall. Whereas guaranteeing of capital is prohibited in all schools of Islamic law. Even if the third party guaranteeing the capital is government, it shall be declared non-permissible, as the government treasury is the property of the whole community and should not be exposed to financial risk and venture of some individuals or entities, so that public trust should not be used to compensate the losses of others. And then the sale and lease back structure. Normally what we see in Ijara skook, as we observed in the Wabda skooks as well, the originator sells the asset to the SPV and then lease it back, which has been questioned by the scholars. It doesn't seem morally good. And then pricing of skook, Muslim economists and Sharia scholars have not come up with an alternative to the interest rate. And for these skook certificates, the rate which has been mentioned on these skook certificates, which is actually expected out of the assets, underlying assets, but a fixed rate is mentioned on the skook certificates. Now, the underlying asset can be any asset, but the returns are almost same. For example, if the underlying asset is a truck which has been leased to some lessee, and if the underlying asset is a motorbike which has been leased to another party, or if the underlying asset is a turbines in case of Wabda, which has been leased back to the Wabda. So in all these cases, underlying asset is different, but the returns are same, and these returns are paid throughout the period of these skook certificates. So, but practically or morally, these returns should be different for different assets, and accordingly, the rate of return of these skook investments should be different for different type of skooks, but they are paid almost same in all types of skooks. However, in practice, this return is not at all reflecting the rental of the underlying asset, but the prevalent interest rate. So that return actually is taken from the benchmark, which is Kaibor or Libor, and the same benchmark has been practiced by Islamic banks. And maybe this is the reason that Mufti Taqi Usmani, one of the scholars in the Islamic financial system, he has declared more than 80% of skooks issued in Dubai or UAE un-Islamic, against the Sharia. They are not Sharia compliant. However, it is observed that same rate of return, as we mentioned earlier, that the rate of return which is almost equal to the interest rates which has been derived from the interest rate benchmarks. It is offered for each type of investment for each type of underlying asset. Now let's see the practices in case of Ijara Sukuk. So in case of Ijara Sukuk, the originator that require financing, the originator will establish the SPV. The originator, they will establish an SPV, that is special purpose vehicle, which is a separate legal entity, and actually they have a name, but we are simply using the special purpose vehicle, which is a mechanism. The name can be anything, like in the case of Wabda Sukuk, special purpose vehicle was First Wabda Sukuk Company. Okay, so the SPV doesn't mean that this is a vehicle. Actually, this is a mechanism that can interact with the investors. So this SPV would contact or would sell the Sukuks to the investors. The Sukuk certificates are sold to the investors and cash proceeds, they are received. And then this originator who established this SPV, again the same originator, I draw it separate just to show you different roles of the Sukuk, of the originator, that the same originator will sell the asset which is already in possession of the originator. Like in the case of Wabda, the turbines which were already installed and they were being used by Wabda, they sold those turbines to SPV. So the asset which is already in use of the originator is sold to the SPV against the cash which the SPV received from the Sukuk holders. Now this is a sale contract. Now this is a sale contract, a sale of an asset against a price. Now the asset is in the ownership of the SPV, but that asset is still with the originator, and to justify that there is a lease contract between the originator that now the asset is given back to the originator against the lease payment. There is a lease contract between the originator and the asset. Now all these transfer of ownership, they are in documents. Physically, asset was with the originator and it will remain with the originator. And then after a time period, when the lease contract expires, maybe for 5 or 6, 7, 8 years, whatever is the duration, then the asset will be purchased back by the originator against a price. A price will be paid to the SPV, and then this price, and before that these rental amounts, they will be distributed among the investors of the Sukuk holders. This rental income goes to the Sukuk certificate holders, and then when the price is paid to the SPV, that price is paid back to the investors, and proportionately the Sukuks, they are redeemed. Price is paid to redeem the Sukuks. Now the assets price 6, 7, 8 years before and assets price at the moment of its redemption of the Sukuk should be different. But in this case, the face value is guaranteed by the originator. Again, originator assumes itself as a third party and guarantee the face value of the Sukuk certificates. So you can see here there are so many roles of the originator. First of all, the originator establishes the SPV, special purpose vehicle. Then the originator sells the asset to the SPV, then lease it back the same originator, then purchases the same asset at the fourth step from the SPV, and then finally provides the guarantee assuming itself as a third party. So you can see so many roles of the same party which is questioned by the scholars. And then guaranteeing the face value, that is guaranteeing the capital of the investors, it is against the Sharia laws. So these are the point of conflicts or the controversies which are seen in the practices of Islamic financial institutions. So it makes it doubtful, and the perception created in the market is a negative perception. And we need to rectify the perception by amending all these problems. We need to create harmony among the Sharia scholars' fatwas and their thinkings, and the rules and regulations should be same all over the Islamic world as far as the Islamic financial system is concerned. So this was all about today's. We revised different topics, that is ijara, applications of Islamic finance, then Islamic investment funds and scope. So this is all for today. Inshallah, see you in the next lecture, which is our last lecture. Till then, Assalamu alaikum.